Hey guys, we're back with Royce here on the Liberty Hour. We were just discussing the XFL, and Royce was just telling me his thoughts on it. I'll go ahead and give you guys my thoughts. So, Vince McMahon announced today that the XFL is going to return. It began in 2000. Here's the thing. Anybody, and I've seen some people who think this, who are basically just because the whole national anthem thing and everything, they're thinking, oh my God, the NFL is so wussy, the XFL's back, they'll beat out the NFL. Look, if you think XFL is going to beat out the NFL even remotely, you don't even deserve a description from me how wrong I think you are. The thing is, the XFL, I think that it will draw some fans in initially, but it's going to die out. I mean, it's going to be like last time. I mean, there's no way they can physically keep up people from watching that brand of football. And what'll be really interesting, I will say this, is players who come out of college and stuff like that who are trying to get recruited by NFL teams, and then if they choose to go to XFL and stuff like that, that will be interesting to see if they actually get anybody in from that. I know there was a league separate from the NFL called the USFL, and that had Steve Young and Herschel Walker that was they came into that, and that kind of got that a little coverage. But the XFL, I don't know, man. I mean, it's a giant question mark right now. I don't want to say it's going to be complete trash, but I can only see it really staying around for like 3 years, honestly.
Yeah. I feel like it's going to be a sport that, quote unquote sport, that it comes out and everyone's going to be like, I wonder how this is going to turn out. And then the first one just crashes and burns and it's like, it's not better than normal football. And to touch on the anthem issue, it's starting to get ridiculous. I mean, talking about the anthem and just the issue going on with it, as far as I'm concerned. Because, I agree. And a couple things going on in the NFL, and I'll just touch on these. Apparently, in the Super Bowl, there was an ad from the veterans that said they encourage standing for the anthem, and that's getting chopped from the ad bit. The NFL said, no, we don't want to be political. And I don't know if you heard about this or not, but next year they're planning for players to be in the locker room while the national anthem is playing.
Really?
So, yeah, and I think they've already implemented the policy, and they're saying, you know what, we're going to talk about it at the league meetings in the offseason, but we're planning on having the players in the locker room during the national anthem just so we don't get this political backlash from, let's say, our president and other organizations like that.
Wow, I didn't even know about that.
I don't know. It's gotten to a point where I'm like, do we really need to take all of these steps?
Well, that's the thing. And, it's a whole other conversation about me thinking, why do we even have to have the national anthem so much talked about and have it before every single sports game personally? But I agree with you. It's just it gets old. It definitely gets old. And
it's not the fact that it gets old. It's more or less the fact that the message has been hijacked, more or less.
Yeah.
And it's it was for equality. It was for other things. And I'm not going to get started on Kaepernick because that's a completely different tangent rant for me, but only because we're not going to go there.
Right.
But
right.
It's ever since the president sent out that tweet, get off Twitter, sent the tweet that said, this is disrespecting all the veterans and stuff. Why are they protesting our anthem? That's not the point.
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
We're all human beings. We're all here, one and the same, but we don't think we're being treated the same. It's not, they're protesting the anthem and disrespecting people.
Well, and the thing about it is, it wasn't the players who made it necessarily into the big issue. It was everybody else who had a problem with it. It was Trump.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it was Trump. Trump is what started the fire, or put fuel on it, if you will.
Yeah.
There were already a few people doing it, but the amount of people that did it after Trump opened his mouth about it expanded tenfold, at least.
Oh, yeah.
And if he would have just been okay, whatever, I disagree with it, but I'm not going to say anything about it, whatever, they can do whatever they want because they're free human beings in a free society. It wouldn't have been as much of a big deal, and people calling racism towards everybody and everything. It would just, people would have done their thing, and we would have gone on with our day.
Oh, yeah. It's just...
Yeah. But, Yeah, I know. I'm with you. So we'll see how the XFL does. It'll be interesting to see how everything turns out. But with all that being said, we're actually going to go on to our first somewhat political issue. Now, this is the good news story of the week that involves something in somebody very bad. So the good news story of the week, Larry Nassar has finally been sentenced to prison. So Larry Nassar, if you don't know of him, he was a once renowned sports physician treating America's foremost Olympic woman gymnasts. Nassar will now spend the rest of his life behind bars. The disgraced former USA Gymnastics and Michigan State University doctor was sentenced to 40 to 175 years in prison. A judge announced Wednesday after more than 150 women and girls said in court that he sexually abused them over the last 2 decades. The judge was not nice to him at all. She was very harsh. She said, quote, "I have just signed your death warrant." And so I guess that's a good story, man. It's good that obviously he's been sentenced. It's not good what happened to everybody, obviously. But thank God that this monster's finally been put in prison. It's just so sad, man. There's a lot of just terrible people out there. Like I was talking last week about the 2 parents that kept their kids basically made them their slaves almost, or just were like keeping them captive. There's just so many sick people out there, and I'm glad that we finally have one of the bad ones that's going to be behind bars and will not be able to get out of there. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, actually, it's one of those things where it's a school campus. This happened at Michigan State, or he worked at Michigan State, I believe. And I applaud the judge for what she did. Again, when I first heard the sentence, I'm like, 175 years? Like, really? But yeah. At the same time, I have other issues with the story that are close to Larry Nassar, but it's more about the president of the school who was allowed to resign today. She actually resigned.
Yeah. It's like, how do you let that happen?
Yeah, and I was listening to stuff all morning about this and how they were talking about how he has to sit in the jury room for the next 3 days listening to all 156 people that have something to say that were victims. All the victims are telling their stories in court to the judge and him, and they're both sitting there. But I'm hearing stories as well that the president of the school called these women liars, saying wow. "Oh, you this isn't that. You can't do that. You're not telling the truth about this." And I'm like, when I first heard that, I'm like, really? What is this? This is a school. This isn't anything, some bad place. This is school where you're supposed to be helping out. This is not, I don't want to call it a safe space, but it's a community.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're calling women in your community who feel threatened by this man liars. And I've even heard today that some of the women and girls have taken their own lives just because they can't handle what happened to them with this guy. It's like, how in the world did we get to a point where this got so bad and no one was going to do anything about it?
Especially in this case, and there's a lot of other cases that go across the U.S. and college campuses where people do ignore what women say and stuff like that. And that's a big problem. Instead, here's the thing. So we obviously, this kind of goes along with the Me Too movement and the Women's March that was just had last weekend because there was 1 million protesters out there. There's a couple things I want to say on that in a minute, but separate from that real quick. I think instead of just blindly trusting what a victim says all the time or blindly just not trusting them like a lot of college presidents do, we actually just need to actually let the legal system do its thing, actually have due process and maybe cover that in the news instead of saying, oh no, this person was a liar, this person's telling the truth. Stop making it a truth game. Make it actually the real thing. Show our legal system and how it actually works and how it's not broken.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's just a sad story overall of people just don't feel safe. And we're talking about, I think he was a U.S. Gymnastics Olympian team physician as well.
Yeah, no, he was. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, what? And the fact that it's 156 people to me is beyond
insane.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. So yeah, to piggyback off everything we were just talking about. So we were just talking about the Women's March. I was just mentioning that. So last week was the Women's March all across America. There's actually at Sierra they're going to have a Women's March kind of thing on campus in a couple of weeks. But basically, yeah. So we just had the Women's March last week. There was 1 million people total. Combined across the country, more than 1 million rally at women's marches in the U.S. This was on the 21st, so when would that have been? That would have been Sunday, right? Yeah, Sunday.
Yeah.
So, yep. So I just want to get your thoughts. So obviously they started last year after Trump got elected president, and there was more people at it last year actually than there was this year. But I want to get your thoughts on it. So what do you think of the Women's March? Do you think it's effective in terms of what they're protesting for? Do you think that there should be more targeted? Like, I guess that's the best question I could ask on it. Just what are your thoughts on it in general?
Well, I think as far as how it's being executed, I like all of the points that they're bringing out. Like it's all like the women's rights, pro-life, pro-choice, all this stuff. And in my opinion, I applaud what they're trying to do, but when we're in an age in this country where our president can't handle can't handle a criticism, can't handle people going against what he says, and it's just it's a time of divisiveness in this country. When did we get to this point of where we as people cannot look at each other as the same?
Yeah. Women,
African American, Asian, Mexican, we're all human beings.
Yep.
And to me, the fact that it's gotten to this point is beyond frustrating. And someone, namely our president, needs to say something that is progressive towards going to a goal or getting to a goal the goal that America strived for, which was everyone here is equal. And we all have the right to say whatever we want, even whether you like it or not.
Right. Well, and I'm with you for the most part on that, and I'm glad we both agree on the terms of the sexual harassment thing. I think a lot of people who try to downplay it, there are definitely some people that are going to lie, okay? Period. That's going to happen regardless. So you have roughly, 5-6% of women who make sexual harassment claims that lie. And that's a problem. Don't get me wrong. And that's why I say we need to see due process and all this. But you can't paint like everybody is saying that they're, just like they're wrong or anything like that. It's just wrong to say that these women are not telling the truth, or to say that, we shouldn't, trust them at all. I think that you should trust them to some extent. I just think that there should be court trials, and that should be what's shown in the media, because that's what matters. But in terms of this protest, I mean, they have the freedom to do it, period. For me, there's a couple of things. So one, if they actually wanted to fight for progressive causes, since they are progressive for it, what they should be pushing for is, and I don't agree with this because I'm not a progressive, but I'm just saying this would be what helps their cause. If they actually fought for specific issues, because it doesn't seem necessarily targeted. So, for example, there was a sign at one of the rallies that said, Medicare for all is a woman's issue. So, here's my thing. So, you don't see many signs like that. You may only see stuff that is like, the stuff that Trump said or whatever, just anti-Trump stuff and all that kind of, junk. But when you actually talk about issues and say, oh, that's a woman's issue, say this is a woman's issue, that's going to be much more effective, because you're going to have a lot more people who are going to jump on board with actual issues that will help out your cause, versus just, I don't want to say standing there and shouting, but in a sense, it almost seems like to a lot of Americans out there, when they see this, that's almost what they see. And that's a problem, in my opinion. I'll expand on that in a sec for you guys. My 15 minutes are up here. I'll start part 4 in just a second.